Recording in progress.
Welcome to Boston Real Estate Times. Our guest today is Shelby Schulman. She has a very unique title for the first time I've heard in the world, which is Beekeeping Team Regional Manager for the United States for a company based in Canada called Alvéole. I hope I pronounce all them correctly, right, Shelby?
That was perfect. You nailed it.
Excellent. Good. Now, she's our guest because we at the Boston Real Estate Times are very committed to promote zero carbon emissions. And we are told that commercial real estate is responsible for almost 40% of carbon emissions. So her company has come up with a very unique idea about beekeeping at rooftops and wherever possible for a healthy natural life and remove the or reduce the carbon emissions. We are going to talk to her about her company's goals and missions. And also they have a big expansion plan in the United States as well. So Selby, welcome to our show and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Same thing here with me too. And I'm also really excited to talk to you about it. So let's first start with tell us about your company, when the company was founded, where it is based, and what it does, and then we'll talk about expansion in the US.
Amazing. So Alvéole is an amazing company. Obviously, I would say that because I work there. We were founded in 2013 in Montreal, Canada. And from there, we kind of exploded very quickly. It went from one hive to 100 hives and then to 1,000 hives across, 10 cities throughout North America quite quickly, all underlying the mission to reconnect people to nature in cities. The concept really started with three best friends who had a little bit of beekeeping experience, and they were from Montreal, so they were very used to the hustle and bustle of a city. And they quickly felt that they wanted to bring this connection that they were able to foster with bees into the city. So they did just that. They brought a couple of hives into the city, and slowly but surely, the buzz kind of built. From there, very, very quickly, of course, as I explained, we just kind of started growing and quickly infiltrated the US in 2019 in Chicago. And then from there, a year later, opened up 10 more cities. And then now we look towards 2022, where we'll be operating in a lot more cities across the US. Right now, we're in 13 US cities, and we'll be opening an additional 9 next year. Again,
what about where the Boston comes in this picture?
So Boston is actually going to be one of our new cities next year. And the reason that Boston is on our list for next year is actually because our clientele that we currently have, majority in the commercial real estate industry, need us to be there. They want us to be there. They're asking, hey, we have buildings all throughout Boston, and it would be amazing if we're able to maintain the single vendor of Alvéole in Boston as well. And so that's what is bringing us to Boston.
Okay. Now, how the pricing structure works? Like, what is your revenue model, and how you help the commercial real estate owners and developers?
So for us, we actually work on, it's kind of like a subscription-based model. So every year there's an associated fee with whatever service the organization, the company, the commercial real estate building has. So we have a couple of different packages, and based on whatever package the client has will correspond to the different fee. It's anything between a $5,000 yearly fee to an $11,000 yearly fee. And this can either come from some sort of sustainability budget, a tenant engagement budget. It could be picked off of a couple of budgets. But as you probably know, and a lot of our listeners will know, is that number is quite small for the value that a project like this brings to a building.
Sure. Now, let's talk about benefits to the developers and the landlords. What is the benefit? How they get benefit from this?
So I think that there are a couple of different ways in which that this project really brings a huge benefit to the commercial real estate industry specifically. The first is that it drives building attractiveness and retention. These projects quickly become a way that people identify with their buildings and connect to their buildings. It really creates a community within the building space and allows people to better connect to the building at large and want to stay. The other thing is it adds to a sustainability strategy. A lot of you mentioned carbon emissions at one point. And I
Yes.
think what's very interesting is, you know, changing light bulbs is great. Changing toilet paper is great, but it's really not something that brings people together. It's really not something that tells a story. But the Bee Project is something that oftentimes becomes this ambassador for all of the sustainability initiatives that are happening inside of a building, because it's much easier to talk about bees than it is about a new HVAC system. It makes it very fun and exciting, and it definitely adds to the sustainability strategy, but also ends up being the storyteller and the catalyst for all of these other initiatives that are happening inside of the building. And then the last big factor here is that we're really trying to, foster social and ecological impact in these urban communities. And it's really making people, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, but we're really aiming to make every actor a better citizen. And it's very much so felt in the projects here. And because we are in 2021, almost going into 2022, it's very relevant. People want to be doing something that matters. They want to connect into something that has a larger impact. And again, this Bee Project is something that definitely does that.
Now let's talk a little bit about logistics part as well. So the first question is that how many honey, those hives you can keep on the rooftop? Is there any ratio, any space, or there's a limit of numbers?
So what's actually amazingly fascinating is most people would think that in a city, you know, they're concrete jungles. There's not a lot of flowers. It's not very natural. But in cityscapes, we actually find that there's a huge diversity of diet for the bees. We plant on a bloom cycle because we love to see flowers out in nature. And there's a lot of diversity of flower, as opposed to rural areas where there's one crop for acres and acres and acres. And so
Hmm.
for us in cities, we're kind of seeing that the bees are incredibly happy, and that at this point in time, based on the scope of work that we're doing, there's no real cap in terms of putting these honeybee hives on rooftops. We are very aware of these things, and we're noticing trends across different cities that we operate in, and we're ready to respond accordingly. But at this point, we're not really seeing any sort of issues on that front. When it comes to what we're doing and putting hives on rooftops, we usually try to stay in the range of one or two hives per rooftop, because for us, we're really not there to produce a lot of honey. We're not there to, have 100 beehives. One beehive can do the trick in terms of what we're trying to do, which is just engage with people and kind of like foster a connection between the bees and nature and people. So what we usually do is, or not usually, what we do is we do site visit of any hive location, and we make sure that it's acceptable for both the beekeeper and for the bees. So there are certain height requirements that we have. We have to make sure that it complies with all OSHA standards, and that there are some other minor factors that
Yeah,
we.
so that was going to be another question in terms of the safety and bites by the bees. So is there any precaution, any risk there?
We usually say that our sweet spot is between 2 and 22 floors. However, we're always willing to try anything, just because, we also find that sometimes bees on the 55th story of a Chicago rooftop produce more honey than bees that are at the ground floor. And so it's really all about, it has a lot to do with wind, sunlight, and height. But, we don't know unless we try. And so we're always willing to try. But we're
I'm
also.
talking, also from the safety point of view, for example, like, there are a lot of people who could be allergic to bee bites, etc. So how do you make sure that that doesn't happen?
Amazing question. It always comes up, safety about bees. So we work with a breed of bee. It's an Italian honeybee, and they're very, very docile. They're thinking about wine and cheese all day, not really people. And so they're operating on their own timeline. What they're thinking about every day are finding flowers and making sure that the colony is healthy. They really are not out to get us in any way, shape, or form. Again, incredibly docile bee that we're working with. And because they're so focused on the health of the hive, they have no interest in the people around them. We have hives that are located on tenant amenity decks, so literally where people are coming, going, eating their lunches, and there's no increased influx of like bee activity. It's actually pretty amazing. Bees work in a really efficient way. So they tell an associated number of bees to go to different pockets of flowers, And so just because you have a honeybee hive on your rooftop, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have more honeybees on, the green roof or the patio with all the planter boxes that you've got. It actually just means that the bees are going to be flying around in the general area within a 3 mile radius looking for flowers. So in terms of allergies, stings, whatever it might be, we really have nothing to worry about because of the way that these bees specifically are, genetically inclined to act.
Okay. But I'm sure that you must be also educating, the neighbors about bee stings, etc., or it's really not needed.
It's really not needed. We have guides that we give to all of our clients in terms of safety around the hives in the event that there is like window washers or any sort of like engineering staff that needs to go near the hives, but it's really not necessary. The
Okay.
biggest risk that's incurred is when the beekeeper is on site, when we're opening up the hive and manipulating the frames. But actually, what ends up happening usually is members of the property management team come with us, or maybe different tenants come with us, and it's really, really a low risk environment.
Now, I have two other questions for you. Number one is, have you done any study about how much honey is produced and from these hives, and what happens to that honey?
Yes, so it's actually part of the amazing thing about the service that we provide, which is we do small batch extraction. So this means that if you have a honeybee hive on your rooftop, we're going to take that honey and we are going to extract it separate from everything else so that what you're getting back is the honey that your bees produce. So the reason that this is so amazing is because every rooftop is going to produce different honey. The bees on your roof are traveling within a 3 mile radius from their home base. And so that means that even if there's a hive a couple blocks away, that 3 mile radius is different, which means that the flowers are different within that 3 mile radius. So the honey can smell, look, and taste completely different. Each
So,
hive we guarantee 100 jars of honey with a personalized label as well. So it really tells the story of the Honeybee Project. But as we know, nature is nature, and sometimes we can't guarantee that that honey is coming from your designated hive just based on weather, the activity, a plethora of other things. But typically, what we see, as long as we're following, a typical beekeeping seasonality chart, we're able to guarantee that honey from the designated hive.
okay. Now, do you have the other question is that if you look at the U.S. market, for example, so in how many markets, which are the cities and towns where you are already active?
We have quite a few. So we are active in
I'm talking about
Seattle.
major cities. Yes.
Yep. We're active in it's a list of 13 cities that I'll give you. They're all major cities, but Seattle, Portland, Sacramento, Los Angeles, San Diego, Denver, Austin, Houston, Dallas, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York.
Yeah. Okay. And the next one is you include Boston. You said earlier that Boston is in the on the list, right?
Yes, Boston we will be opening in 2022.
2022. Okay. Now, so how you are approaching these commercial real estate owners and managers? What is your approach, or what is their response to your approach to them?
It's kind of funny. Sometimes you immediately get people that say, "I in no way would I ever put beehives on my rooftop. You guys are crazy." But actually, what we're seeing more and more is um, this larger kind of like conscientiousness towards the environment, and just this project of putting beehives on roofs is becoming more and more common. And as that's happening, there's much more um, of a receptiveness to the project itself, and people are incredibly excited and eager for it. I think that the biggest fear or block is safety.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, we very rarely hear that the financials of the project are the block. We very rarely hear that it has anything to do with like the logistics. We really handle everything when it comes to hive installation, hive maintenance, and beyond. So probably the biggest block is just like slightly on the safety side. Um, but generally speaking, people are incredibly excited about the project. And now we're actually in a position where we're not reaching out to organizations, but they're actually coming to us saying, "Hey, we heard about this. We want bees on our roof. Can you bring us bees?"
Now you mentioned earlier, and for those of us who are not very familiar and knowledgeable about honeybees, You mentioned that they go to up to 3 miles radius or something. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the honeybees?
Of course. Oh, this is my
Sure.
favorite thing to talk about.
Okay.
Um, so I'm trying to think of the best way to start, but let's just start with the hive itself.
Hmm.
Um, Inside of the hive, we have three main characters. We have the worker bee, they make up about 95% of the colony. They get their name for a reason. They work very, very hard, and they are all the female bees. So they are
Hmm.
responsible from everything to nursing baby bees to foraging and finding nectar, bringing it back to the hive and repurposing it into honey, and everything in between. We have our drone bees, which make up about 5% of the colony, and there are male bees. And I'm so sorry to any men that are listening out there, but they actually really have no purpose inside of the hive. They
Hmm.
can't clean themselves, they can't feed themselves. Um, they don't have stingers, so they can't protect the hive. So they kind of just like walk around the hive all day asking for help. Their
Hmm.
one day to shine is when a neighboring queen bee says, hey boys, meet me under this tree at this time. I need your help. And that on that day, they go out and they fertilize a queen, which actually, again, we need that. We absolutely need our drones. It's just inside of the hive. They're not really doing their fair share of the work, but we need them for their thing. And then we have the queen bee, which I think everyone knows about. There's
Sure.
one queen per hive, and that individual is the mother to all of the bees inside of the hive. She's the reason that the hive continues to grow. She'll lay up to 2,000 eggs per day, making sure that the population of bees is continuing, especially in our hot, hot, hot summer months when our bees are working very, very hard. We need to make sure that the population is constantly growing. And my last thing that I'll share about the hive itself is the honeybee hive actually, it kind of like resembles a building in that
Hmm.
as time goes on, the building grows in terms of population. So the hive starts off at one box with a small population of bees. And as the season continues, the population is going to increase ever so slightly to accommodate for the additional work that's needed and beyond. And so as that population increases, the size also increases. The beekeeper will come and bring a second box on top to make sure that there's enough room for all of those bees, eventually even bringing it up to 3 boxes high. And inside of that hive, inside of that building, everyone is kind of working and doing their own thing. But generally speaking, in a honeybee hive, while all of those bees have a different task on that given day, they're all working for the collective good. They're working for each other. And the reason that they have this drive to work as hard as they do is because they're there to support the colony itself. They're not there for their individual efforts or their, individual needs. They're there for the colony. And so I know that maybe some of us might be a little jaded in terms of humanity, but at the end of the day, like a lot of us are out in the world doing our jobs or whatever work that we do in order to support not just us but a community of people. And so I think it's a pretty beautiful illusion to be able to
So,
drop.
and what happens during winter? Like snow. How does the weather impacts their hives?
So as winter starts and as the weather starts to change in the fall and then eventually the winter, the colony shrinks.
Hmm.
The queen stops laying eggs because it's a genetic inclination where, like, as it gets colder, the hive kind of transitions from their summer activities into their winter activities. And they don't hibernate. They're not sleeping or anything like that, but they stay inside of the hive because it's too cold for them to leave. And
Hmm.
so the way that I like to think about it is it actually is like a giant bee cuddle fest where they
Hmm.
all just centralize around the queen, and their sole purpose at this point is to keep the hive warm. The colony has to always maintain a temperature of about 95 degrees. And so in order to do that, they actually crazily alter their bodies in a weird way. They just decouple their wings. Bee wings usually look like this. So in the winter, they decouple them and they look like this, and they vibrate their bodies and shape their wings in a little bit of a different way. And they literally are just producing heat with their bodies all winter long to make sure that not only they can survive until the spring, but also their queen can.
Okay. I think I must say that I'm highly got very educated with this conversation, and it's a very interesting topic. And hopefully, the landlords and the developers will listen to this story, and we'll see get more honey as well in the process. Now, before I let you go, your last word on this topic.
Oh, so difficult. But I think my last word on this topic is that the any honeybee project that we are to start with any organization, it really all stems from what value you think it will bring to you. What we can do with this project is 110 different things, whether it's tenant engagement, sustainable corporate gifts, um, supporting different ESG goals that you might have. The list kind of goes on and on and on. And because of the flexibility of the service that we provide, we're really able to make it match whatever you all need. And so I strongly urge you to learn more about what it is that we do, but also think outside of the box in terms of what this can do for your building, your organization, your company, whatever it might be, because it's an incredible project, so fun, so engaging, and definitely supports a lot of those sustainability goals that you may have.
Salvi, thank you very much, and I must say thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. It was great being here.
Sure.